Check us out to hear the latest on life in the volunteer state. Yvonnca and her guests discuss everything from life, love, and business with a Tennessee flair.
It's a Tennessee thing!
Always relatable, always relevant, and always a good time. This is Talkin Tennessee, and now your host, Yvonnca.
This episode is brought to you by the Landis Team, your go-to real estate family in East Tennessee. If you are looking to buy or sell, we are the ones you should call. Give us a call at 865-660-1186 or check out our website at YvoncaSellsRealEstate.com. That's Yvonnca, YVONNCA, sellsrealestate.com.
Welcome back to Talkin Tennessee with Yvonnca. I am your host, and we have a new guest in this.
Wait a minute. I'm gonna let you finish, but you're in my seat.
Okay.
Dr. Small?
How are you, sir?
I'm well. Good to see you. So welcome back to Talkin Tennessee with David and Tyvi.
Yes, sir.
I'm blessed to be here today with my friend, Dr. Tyvi Small from the University of Tennessee. How you doing today, Doc?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here with you, as always. Good to sit down with a good friend, somebody that I respect for what you do, what you've done, and what you continue to attempt to do.
Absolutely.
At my alma mater and in this community.
Before we move on, let me just say thank you and thank you and your family for what you do for our community, not just UT, but as I think about people who are really making a difference and making an impact. You are doing it in so many areas, and I think it's a roadmap. I think for other folks who really want to be entrepreneurs, be business leaders, but also not forget about how to give back to the community. So thank you all for what y'all do.
We appreciate the recognition, but we do what we do because we're called to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has a little bit of a calling on, and you know what? I'm gonna get into this. You know why we do what we do when it started?
Nope, I don't.
We were active in church, and we did things when people asked us to and whatnot, but we did not make it a priority. We didn't make it a focal point of our lives. And in 2013, I got sick, and I had a 9% chance of survival. I was in the hospital for 6 months, pancreas went bad. But during that time, my wife never left the hospital. And she took it upon herself through her prayer and from conversations she had with God to go and start praying for everybody.
Wow.
Everybody was in ICU. She went from bed to bed. They in ICU, I didn't know this. She told me this after. In ICU, they label you bed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I was bed 7. But she would go, I don't know, she started bed 1, whatever. But she would go from room to room, bed to bed, and pray for the people that were in there. People that had family there, people that didn't have family there. She just went and prayed for everybody.
Wow, that's powerful.
And then beyond that, I got 40 units of blood. You've heard about the blood drive. They started a blood drive while I was there, and while I was actually still in the hospital. And when we got out, Yvonnca was like, I was so moved when I looked up on those buses and I saw everybody coming together and donating. Some of them didn't even know you. Some of them knew you and just wanted to know how they could help.
Wow.
And she looked at it and she said, there's power in this. Not power that I need for myself, but power for this community. And beyond that, and this was a conversation this past weekend in our house, she would say it, my former employer would say it to me, a lot of people would say, God left you here for a reason.
Right.
Why are you still here? What do you think your purpose is? Why do you think God left you here? Because my wife and my God saved me. I know that. But to think about, hey, why are you still here? It kind of just was a springboard for me to actually get moving and get active. And for our family, we kind of all fell in line, staying equally yoked. And we kind of use it as a springboard to move into doing and what I said was do things for something and for some people that are outside of your four walls,
Right.
outside of your direct circle,
Right.
to be proactive in their lives, to be proactive in the community, to where you're making a difference for things that don't impact your own household, your own circle.
You know, my pastor used to always say, you know, your true test is when you can do something for somebody who can't do something for you back.
Absolutely.
Right? You have such a powerful story. Your family has such a powerful story, and first thing I took from that is out of your trauma and tragedy, you know, came something that can help other people. So even in our kind of deepest, darkest moments, you know, what comes out of that is, hey, I can still help others, or even though it's affecting me, when I get the help, it's gonna reverberate past me. But the other thing that I heard from this is this idea of purpose and pivot, right? So talk about coming on the other side of that, because I know sometimes brothers, when you know how we get, right? You know, we come back, we got to show that we're still Superman and we're still strong and that we can still handle this. And this was a pivot moment in your life, right? So how would you talk to other brothers from wherever that pivot is, whether it was health or loss of job or anything in between? What was that like for you?
Well, first off, I think there's a fallacy in that, not personally with you, but there's a fallacy in thinking that there has to be, as a man, that there has to be a moment,
Right.
a hallelujah chorus moment, you know, to where, oh, today's the day I have to do something. Right. Today's the day I have to take change. Today's the day I have to start making a difference. Mm-hmm. We as men need to realize that every day you make a decision. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to be life-changing and life-altering, but every day we make a difference. And every day we need to, A, look to make a difference, but B, we also look to be honest with ourselves. What do I truly need? Mm-hmm. Beyond material things, beyond sustenance, what do I actually need for myself? And a lot of men won't be honest with themselves. Right. They won't be honest that they're at that point. They won't be honest that they can do something other than have a job, have a wife, kids, whatever, have to be in the streets, make money, whatever. A lot of men won't be honest with themselves to say, hey, I can do something. I can be great personally. I can do great things in this community, and I can actually do something and be something meaningful.
So as I think about, man, that was so many nuggets to unpack. But the first thing is, society has you drew a box over there. Many of y'all of course can't see it, but you drew a box, right? Mm-hmm. And most of the times, men are put in this box, right? And society, religion, I mean, you name it, has told us this is what we're supposed to do and be, mm-hmm. right? And many of the things that you talked about sometimes will fall outside of that box. Like, hey, I need to seek support. I need help. I need a mentor. I'm struggling here. And so as you talk about kind of some of the things that that men could and should, I mean, we have to start to unpack this from a very, very macro level to really think about, first of all, how society has positioned what manhood, who men are and what they should be and how they should act, right? And I think that's the first thing.
Absolutely. And I get this question from people that think I have my stuff together. Right. And I say think I have my stuff together because I don't know about you, but I struggle every day.
Every day.
But they say, oh, you're the man. How can I be like you? What do you do to be in the position you're in? I struggle. Yeah. I struggle. And
by the grace of God.
There.
Wow.
But people in general, they look at other people and say, oh, if I can be like that, then I can call myself a man. Oh, if I can have this job, if I can wear these clothes, if I can drive this car, if I can live in this town, in this suburb, in this subdivision, whatever, in this building, whatever, then I will have arrived. Then I can call myself a man if I can take care of everything, if I can whoop somebody, then I'm a man. And I don't know that through accomplishments,
Right.
we can judge manhood. I don't think that we can judge it. I think that true manhood is being able to admit that I'm not here by myself. I can't do this by myself. And I think that true manhood is embracing all the things around you that can help you every day, all the things around you that pour into you and you know, kind of shape you every day.
Right.
Embracing all that, the good and the bad. So how do you perceive what shapes you into a man and where you actually, other than anatomy, call yourself a man?
Yeah, well, you know, people often say, you know, you see my glory, but you don't know my story, right?
Absolutely.
So people see this David, right? They don't see the David that was laying in the hospital bed, right?
Right.
And so for half a year, let that sink in for a minute, right? And so, you know, people often see the finished product, but they don't see the sharpening piece of it, right? And so I think that's one of the things. I think men, we have to be more vulnerable about sharing it all, right? How I got here, what things I had to go through, because particularly as older men now and that next generation that's coming behind us, I think it's important for us to really be honest about our story, right? The Tyvi you see today, you rewind, you know, 20 years, and it was a different person. And being honest about that, because they have something that we didn't have. They have social media,
Absolutely.
right? And later on, they had something else that we didn't have, which is COVID. So as I think about kind of this generation coming through this whole social media era and what that has done mentally and emotionally and spiritually, but I also then think they had this big old thing that for maybe some adults was a flashpoint, but for them it was such a big, meaningful incident that I think we haven't paid enough attention to as we start to think about this next generation, particularly as I think about the young men in our communities.
I think I heard this somewhere, and for lack of a better term, OGs and YNs. Okay,
Yeah.
and that might make somebody a little standoffish to hear that, but
Right.
it is what it is. And somebody said, why are these young folks out there, these quote unquote YNs, why are they not matriculating into OGs?
Right.
And one thing I've learned at this stage of my life, I had my dad when I lived with my dad when my dad was here. And my dad moved away to Florida, and you know, we got busy, and he wasn't necessarily the person that I would always turn to. He's a great person, smart, wise, whatever. But I had my first employer, black man. Then I had Yvonca's granddaddy and my second employer. Then I had Yvonca's granddaddy, Yvonca's dad, and my bishop. And I didn't realize it, but those were, even my dad, they were older, wiser forces in my life. And those people were confident enough in themselves and secure enough in themselves to pour into me. Whether or not I realized they were pouring into me, they were absolutely pouring into me. And there's a disconnect, I think, between the quote unquote the unks, the OGs, and the YNs, the young people. And I've heard this from several people in our community that they wholeheartedly across the board did not do a good job of pouring in the next generation. And we lack doing that as well. And you're around it more because you're around these young people more so than I am. Do you see that disconnect? Do you feel that disconnect? And how do we bridge the gap of that disconnect?
You know, David, I see it and I feel it, particularly in the work that I do, working with young folks. The interesting thing is, I get older every year, and every year they stay the same age, right? 18
Absolutely.
to 20, 21, 22
That's the
years
nature
old.
of what you do.
Right, and I do think there's a disconnect, and I think we have to be proactive, those of us who are OGs, about building bridges, right? I think sometimes we're waiting on the next generation to do that, but I think part of our responsibility is to make sure that we can build the bridge back to the next generation. Because if we want to exist in 50, 60, 70 years, if we don't start building bridges now, it won't happen. And I do think that we often, you know, many times we often think, well, people have to go through what I went through, right? Because I went through this, then you have to go through this. And I think sometimes it's understanding this generation and where they are and how they process and how they think through things. And if we can take the time to do that, people often give this generation a hard time. I love this generation. They are smart, they are creative, they're innovative, they're entrepreneurial, they want to help others. We just got to figure out a way in which to do that, help build bridges so that they can do that and still be true to who they are. Because I do think that, people often say, well, they're the next generation. No, they're the generation now, right? When you think about major movements in our country, right, those didn't happen with people who had gray hair like me and you, right? They were young folks, right? When people think about Martin Luther King, he never lived to the age of 40. He never made it to 40, right? So all of that happened before he was 40, right? He was 39 when he was killed, murdered, assassinated. Right, so I do think that we have to use the tools that we've been given to pave the pathway make it just a little bit easier for the next generation to move farther than what we moved. And I do think that David, that comes with, brother, to be honest with you, Jet, stepping out of self and stepping out of ego and realizing that this is bigger than you and I, right? This is much bigger than you and I.
I'm guilty, and that ego word. So that ego word in and of itself is a mouthful. That gets in the way of a lot of things that we as men need to realize and need to let go of the ego and allow ourselves to realize a lot of these things. I'm guilty of not reaching back. I'm guilty of saying, y'all don't know what you're doing. You can't speak on this because we've got the experience you don't, generationally. Right. So I'm guilty of that. I see the problem. I try not to be, but it's very easy for us to fall into those roles. A lot of it, I think, may have to do with we heard it from a lot of those older folks. We had some that poured into us, but at the same time, in general, you hear about it. You hear about, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You guys didn't fight in Vietnam. You guys didn't, right. You didn't build this country. You weren't part of the industrial boom, whatever.
So I had a mentor here once, and he was talking about this idea of the next generation. And he said, everything is all good until the mentee starts outshining the mentor. And I think when you talk about ego, that was one of the things that came into mind, is that we're good as long as they're at our feet learning from us. We're the wise sage and we're pouring in. But as soon as we get to the point where they start outshining us, then that's when there's this tension, right? And I do think that for communities to grow, I'm okay with the tension, right? I mean, if you think about every movement, there was always people on either end of it. So I'm okay with that tension, because that's when we talk about iron sharpens iron, right? That's what gets us to a better decision, because you got you on one side and I'm on the other side, and when we get together and have this tension in the middle, that's where we come up to the best decision. So I'm okay with that. But really thinking about when it's our time, there's sometimes that we need to shine, right? And there's sometimes where we need to do the shining, right? Where we step back and go, next generation, it is yours. And there's a role for all of us. Colleague and I were talking about this a minute ago. When we talked about civil rights movement, she said, there are people who could play, pay, or pray, right? There was space for everybody. So when you think about when folks got arrested, so the business person who owned the funeral home or who owned the insurance company, right? They may never have been out there on the front lines marching, but when they got arrested, they needed bail, right? They were coming in there getting them bailed out. Like that was their part of the movement, right? Somebody had to, they had to eat, right? And so many restaurants wouldn't serve them, right? So these, not to be gendered, but a lot of the moms and the grandmoms, they would be out there having food and making dinner to make sure that they had sustenance to continue moving on the fight, right? And so there's a space and place for all of us. We just got to be comfortable that there are reasons, seasons, and lifetimes, right? So sometimes I'm here, right, doing this, and then other times I shift to another role, and then I shift to another role, and we have to be okay with that. Because I do think the next generation is powerful. I think and with their ingenuity and all the things that they have access to, David, if we empower them and support them, I think we're going to be on a really good trajectory.
Like I said, I'm guilty of not reaching back, but I'm also guilty of, and my wife will ask me this, who do you allow yourself to be taught by? Talking about me personally. Who does David allow himself to be taught by? Mm-hmm. And I think, and I have to think about that, and when she says it to me, I got to stop, and I may not admit it to her, but I admit it to myself. But we have to be able to allow ourselves to be taught by some of these younger folks. Mm-hmm. You seem to be very comfortable in that. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with what you do for a living.
Right.
And the kids you work with on a regular, younger people that you work with on a regular basis. How would you recommend that more men embrace that and move to a state where they allow themselves to be taught and allow themselves to open up to new and different?
You know, as men of faith, and we know that many times it's. I often tell people to start with self first, because I think we all have stuff here that we need to deal with.
A lot of it.
And once we get to the point we can deal with all of this stuff, because our experiences color how we approach life, right? And we approach difficulties and situations and this. You know, I grew up without a father in the household, right? You know, for decades, upwards of 30, right? And so having people in our lives who can fill in the gap and pour into the next generation is important. But how do you do that, right? People think it's rocket science, but it's just being there. It's just showing up. It's listening. It's listening to understand, right? And when there are opportunities for us to impart our knowledge, our wisdom, our experiences, we do that. I'm not afraid of this generation, because I understand that at some point I will leave this earth, and at some point somebody else will have to carry on, you know, whatever legacies we want carried on. And so put yourself in space and place where you can engage with the young people, right? Whether that's through your church or whether that's through Big Brothers, Big Sisters, or Boys and Girls Club, whatever that is, find an opportunity to share, right, who you are and your experiences. One of the things, you know, I've heard this said too, is that, you know, you know, you've been, you know, I've been your age, you haven't been mine when I talk to young people, right? And so I know, you know, maybe some of the things you may be facing, although it might be different. So let me use parallels and talking to them and with them and not at them, right? We just, particularly our men, we want to, hey, you got to do this, boy. This is what you got to do, instead of just listening. And that's going to, David, that has to change the whole mindset of what a lot of men think men are supposed to do and be, and how we're supposed to show up, right? Deep friendships are important, man. So to have brothers to sit down and just say, you know what, brother, I understand. To be able to, a place where you can be vulnerable, right? You can say, man, and when young people ask, you know, sometimes they ask stuff, and I'm like, I just don't know the answer, but, you know, to show that I'm human and we're human, right? And I think that's, you know, that's part of it, because we could talk about the young people, right? Those, you know, teens and late early 20s. But we also got to think about just how we support each other's brothers as friends, right?
That's
where
huge right there.
I could just sit down like, Dave, you've been in the game a whole lot longer than I have about in some things, where I can just say, sit down and just go, hey brother, let's help me here. I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I need to talk, right? That's what we take the humanity out of manhood sometimes, right? We're humanity, right?
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes we take that out, and when you are vulnerable, right? When you are authentic, I think people see that, and you and I as brothers, we can build relationships, and then we can then go out to the next generation and help pour into them, and then hopefully they'll take to the generation behind them and pour into them. So I think that's, as I think about who we are and what we need to do to uplift community, that's what I'm thinking, David.
I know I have friends. I have associates, I have friends, and I know which associates and which friends I can go to and speak with about the heavy stuff.
Right.
About the stuff that's not just talking about sports, not just talking about remember when, you know, and you know, whatever it might be. But I think that more men need to be honest about leaning on those people, because yes, you can go and talk to them, but I don't think that enough men, and I'm guilty of it too, will actually go to those people that they can talk to. And if they don't have those people in their peer groups or among their associates, I don't think enough men are honest with themselves about about the need to go out and find somebody specifically to help you carry this, to unload to, and to help carry the burden.
Including therapy.
Yeah, therapy is
counseling.
huge.
Right.
Therapy is huge. I'll admit, I've gone to therapy. Have I done it enough? No, I can continue to work on myself. Are there things that I would like to actually go to therapy and unpack? Yeah, haven't got around to it. Haven't made a priority, but it's there, and I wish that society would not frown, whether it's spoken or unspoken, frown and place stigma on men seeking therapy and working on themselves and realizing that they can't carry all these burdens and whatever's going on inside of them by themselves. And especially black men. It's not just black men, because men in general are stigmatized when that gets out. But especially among the black community, it's just one of those things we don't talk about.
Yeah, one of the things that broke my heart, I was talking to this young man, and I thought I had built a relationship and a rapport with him. Me and this other brother that I know were discipling. I don't want to say names, I don't want to out anybody, but we were discipling this young man, just trying to be mentors and role models. Didn't have a father figure in his life, and we could see that something was going on. So I'm sitting and I said, "Hey, I gave him a hug, and I'm like, wait a minute, it didn't feel right." So I'm like, sit down, and we just started talking. And one of the things he said to me is, "I'm used to suffering by myself." And we're talking but guess what, David? The very things that were causing him to suffer, me and the other brother who was working with him had it in our hands. And I was hurt and I was angry. I'm like, but listen, us, like, we're family. Like, come on, like, you need this. You're suffering here, and we can get this to you in a day and a half, right? The things that he needed. And it wasn't about money or material things, but it was about the connections and the resource and the access that he needed, so they didn't have to suffer.
The ask is uncomfortable.
He was just so...
The ask is uncomfortable. And the fear of the reaction that you get when you ask or when you speak up, the fear, whether or not that fear is true and it's factual, the consequences are factual, the fear is still there.
That's exactly what he said. Even though we have built this relationship, I thought we were connected. I'm like, you don't have to be embarrassed around us.
The ask is uncomfortable.
Yeah, so there is more that we need to do continually in that space, to particularly as this next generation. Because again, what I said earlier, they're facing things that we had no idea about. And I'm glad that there was no social media around when we was growing. Well, at least when I was growing up, right?
Yeah, no, that's huge. It puts pressure on them as far as unrealistic expectations. It puts pressure on them as far as opinions of people that don't matter, shouldn't matter, from across the world or from, whatever far reaches of social media. and they have to deal with that. And that's something we did not have to deal with. But I think, and do I talk about it enough? No. Do I put myself in spaces where I can talk about it, where it's meaningful to talk about? No. So I can do better in that regard. But I think as a whole, we have got to continue that conversation in other rooms and other spaces, so that we can actually, let these young folks know, not even young folks, let other men know, hey, it's okay. And I don't think I'm a person necessarily to blow that trumpet, but I need to be part of the conversation. Absolutely. I need to do better.
Absolutely. Somebody told me once that said, if you have a problem with me, call me. If you don't have my number, then you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And so I think sometimes we take other people's opinions through social media and what people say, and what was it saying? Why would you take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from, right? And so, but that's the plus 40 time. You're thinking, The 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, they're not thinking like that. They're thinking, this, because they do, but regardless of what they tell you, they're pretty big empaths, and so they take these things personally, and it hits to the core. And I think sometimes they don't understand what social media reality from reality. And I think that's part of the conversations as we think about helping the next generation, because there's a level of peer pressure, there's a level of bullying, there's a level of all of this stuff that happens through social media that we don't see, that this next generation of, we often frame it through the frame of young women, and that's absolutely important, but we never really talk about how this, how do young men, young boys, process these same things, and then how does that show up in how they behave, what they do, how they engage. So I do think it's not something that we're gonna fix today, but Tennessee family, I hope it's something that we can start to have the conversation about, because I think our entire society needs to talk. But right now, my heart is with young men, young black men who are just trying to find a way. They're just trying to find their way. They're trying to find a way, and how we need to rally behind them. Let's not demonize them, right? Let's support them. Let's hear them. Let's feel them. They often say, you feel me? Let's feel them. And I think, while it may come across as this colloquialism, I do think they're really asking to be felt, right?
To be heard.
Be heard, right?
Absolutely. And I think that they struggle, men, young people, whatever, struggle to talk about what's bothering them, because nobody feels like that door is open. Nobody feels like that avenue is there. So instead of communicating, they just shut down.
And they're worried about safety, right? They want a safe place, right? They want to know that if I go talk to you, then this is going to be something that between me and you, and you're not going to tell everybody else. That's important for this generation, because, if you think about it, because they have so much access to information, right, with social media and all those things, I think sometimes they want to know that this won't come back, to haunt them, to embarrass them. And so I do think that,
and all that information from social media, that's, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, whatever, all that is going into them. That's all being poured into them. But social media really isn't an outlet to push that back out, to process and to deal with it. So you got all this added extra pressure and all these things going on from social media. And we need to open up the avenues for other men, young people, to talk about that and get those feelings and those thoughts out. Because, we don't cry as men. We're not real with each other on a regular basis. And we don't create safe space. And that's part of, we'd rather sit there and talk about each other's mama and make jokes and everything. It's easier to do that than to be real. Right. It's easier to do that and talk about the balls or whatever than to be real. And we've got to do a better job of coming together, creating these spaces, and being vocal about, hey, these spaces are there, and we are going to make it a safe space, and your business is going to be safe. We're just going to have a conversation.
Thank you all for listening to part 1 of my conversation with David Landis. And make sure that you stay tuned next week for part 2. This has been a great opportunity to really dig into what manhood, brotherhood, friendship, all that is from a male's perspective. So I need y'all to tune in.
Thanks for listening to Talkin Tennessee with Yvonnca. Watch out for our weekly episodes from the first family of real estate, and check us out on the web, www.YvoncaSalesRealEstate.com. See our videos on Yvonca's YouTube channel, or find us on Facebook under Yvonnca Landis, and Twitter @Yvonnca Landis. And don't forget to tell a friend about us. Until next time, Yvonnca signing off.